Hey guys, welcome back to Chatting with Dee. Today I got a chance to interview cannabis expert Hannah Rosenbaum. We spoke about the benefits of CBD and how to incorporate it into your daily life. Chatting with Dee is where you need to be. Let's get started. Hi Hannah, thank you so much for being on my show. How are you doing?
Hi, thanks so much for having me. I'm doing pretty well today. It's nice to finally have like a nice day off in the week.
Oh,
today.
definitely.
How are you doing?
Good, I'm doing good, hanging in there and just continuing to spread love and joy and help others, definitely. So thank you so much for being on here. I'm so excited to get into our convo because I know you have lots to share on the cannabis industry. So let's get right into it. How did you start your journey in the cannabis industry, and how does one get into it if they want to start?
So honestly, one of the coolest things about the cannabis industry is that because it never existed before, you'll find people working in the industry from all different kinds of backgrounds. For me personally, I have a lot of customer service kind of background stuff with jobs. I had a friend who had worked at this one medical dispensary for a few years, and they were actually doing a big hiring because they were getting ready for when Massachusetts was going recreational. And so I ended up having a pretty extensive interview process with this one company and ended up getting hired, and that kind of the rest is history.
Yes, definitely. And can you tell me about, when we had talked off camera a bit, you talked to me about how you were one of the first people to sell cannabis on the East Coast. Tell me how that experience was like.
It was pretty wild. Yeah, it was interesting because I got hired in June 2018. I'm no longer with this company, but back then I got hired. We thought we were going to go recreational in July. So we had this like really intense month of training and education. And then the government didn't approve it. So it was like month by month, we kept waiting to see when that would happen. And actually it's, I think exactly 2 years to today, it might be. We got the approval to go recreational, and my store was one of the first to open up. I was in the morning shift that day, so we had to get there at I had to get up at 5:30 that day, and I will never forget the experience of parking and walking up to the building and seeing that there was already a line wrapped around the corner, several hours before we opened. It was crazy. And so, yeah, we had a bunch of different news crews in there. The first customer at our store was actually the mayor of the city I live in, Northampton. And he bought a chocolate bar and he ended up buying it from the founder of the company. And yeah, it was one of the first 5 sales that morning. So that was really, really crazy.
That is so exciting. And also, I feel like you have people coming in that you wouldn't even think are interested in cannabis.
Oh yeah. I will say, after working in this industry, it really made me realize how everyone uses cannabis. People you would never think. I mean, of course, there's kind of people you would see, stereotypical kind of hippie people. But then there's, just super corporate people would come in. I remember there were ex-police officers, ex-elementary school vice principals, people's parents. There were people I knew from high school whose parents I ran into at the store, and really it was all kinds of people. And that was something that was really interesting about that job, was really, really getting to see how much this plant does for people, and also such a wide range of things that it can do for people.
Let's talk about the wide range of what it can do for people. I know that CBD is huge. What are the benefits of CBDs? Because it can ease so many health symptoms, and I know that a lot of people are looking for alternatives within the CBD industry.
Yeah. So CBD is what we call a cannabinoid. THC is also a cannabinoid, and there are others as well, but the most common ones you'll see, at least at this time, are CBD and THC. CBD is really interesting because it has pretty much no psychoactive effect for people. Really, in the industry, you can never definitively say that something will or won't have an effect on folks, but I would say the majority of people do not experience psychoactive effects or a high from CBD. So some of the really wonderful effects from it are that it has, studies have shown that it can really help reduce inflammation. So for instance, somebody who is very, very sore from a workout could use CBD to help with their muscles. You can also use it for something like, I've seen people use it for migraines effectively. I've personally used CBD for anxiety, and it's actually been very helpful for me just in terms of that. It's kind of like, my experience is that it's a bit calming without feeling, you know, like you're stoned or anything like that. The interesting thing about CBD though is that it's actually not fat soluble by itself. So sometimes I find that if you're taking CBD by yourself, you have to have a bit of a higher dose of it to have more of an obvious effect, or else it's a little bit more like taking an herbal supplement where you'll see some more effects after taking it a little bit more long term. Sometimes what I would recommend to people when they came into the store was, you know, if they were open to it, when you mix a little bit of THC in with CBD, because THC is fat soluble, it actually makes CBD much more effective at lower doses. And similarly, CBD suppresses some of the psychoactivity from the THC. So it can be really effective. For instance, like if you needed some kind of medication during the day for pain or anxiety, but you didn't want to feel like you were, you know, not sober. So that can be a really great way to take CBD as well. And there are a lot of products out there that have a ratio of either 50% THC and 50% CBD, or even, you know, a 4-to-1 ratio of CBD to THC for even less of a chance of feeling any of the high from THC.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. I never really understood the difference between each of those, but thank you for clarifying.
Yeah.
What are the different ways that you can take cannabis?
There are so many ways. So of course there's the most obvious people would think of, which is probably smoking and edibles. Now there's also a whole range of concentrates that you can use, such as, you know, rosin, shatter, wax. Those are most often vaporized with specific kinds of vaporizers. But, you know, with wax, you can actually crumble it onto flour, which is just the cannabis buds. That's what we call it. So that's kind of some more of that type. As far as edibles go, there's a number of different kinds of edibles you can take. So there's the, you know, the more what you would imagine, like candy, cookies, brownies. And then, you know, as far as edibles go, there are also a lot of places will have capsules or pills, CBD or THC to take. That just works the same way as other edibles. And I've even seen some dispensaries that have patches, almost like nicotine patches. Most often those are for medical patients, you know, people who really cannot smoke edibles.
There are so many different ways that you can take cannabis.
Yeah.
I never realized the range of like all these different ways. What do you recommend for somebody who is first time trying cannabis? What do you recommend they start out with?
Well, you know, I would say for anybody, it really comes down to what your comfort level is with different forms of intake. So, you know, with a patient or a customer, I would always ask them what their comfort level is with certain things. So actually, if you were a first-time user, I probably would recommend either a vaporizer pen or an edible. But if you were going to do an edible, I would actually, both of these things, I'd recommend only buying them from dispensaries to make sure that they're safe. With edibles, the reason being, it can be very tricky to figure out dosing. And when you have too much, it can be very uncomfortable. Now, I would say to anybody who experiences feeling too high, where it feels really uncomfortable, CBD actually can remedy that, can help counteract some of that high and bring you back down a little bit, sobriety. With edibles at dispensaries, they're always pre-dosed. And so I would say, you know, start with just, you know, the smallest recommended dose and wait 2 hours. With a vaporizer, again, I would say buy it from a dispensary.
Would a vaporizer be the same as oil, or what is the difference between those two?
Yeah, well, I can show you. So I have this product right here. It's by Rhythm. It's pretty empty right now, but so basically you can buy a battery and cartridge. Cartridge will be pre-filled, and Yeah, a lot of people refer to that as oils.
Mhm.
A lot of people will say oils either referring to this or to a tincture, so it's good to clarify. But yeah, I would say this is actually very potent because it's like essentially the cannabis is refined down to its most pure form to be put in here as distillate. And that can be, it's a bit different from smoking in terms of the experience because it kind of can take a little bit longer to feel it, the effect of it. And you usually need less of it to feel it, or at least for most people.
So for someone who's experienced, they would go more towards oils.
I would say for experienced people, I have seen people use a whole range of different things. A lot of my friends and coworkers really liked to do dabbing, which was basically using those concentrates I mentioned before, shatter wax. There's a whole bunch of other kinds too. And you use a specific kind of dab rig, which is kind of looks like a bong, but you actually have to use a blowtorch to heat it up. So.
Oh, wow.
You can get electronic pens and stuff too. For me, I was always a little intimidated by that. So yeah. I never really, I've done it before, but that's not really my choice of intake. But I mean, I personally, as an experienced user, I alternate between using flower, smoking flower, and using a vaporizer. Vaporizers, a lot of people like them because they're more discreet, you know, or they don't want to smoke. But the benefits of using flower, you know, even though smoking may not be the most healthy way of intake, you also can buy a flower vaporizer. Here's one I really like called the PAX 2.
Okay, cool.
It's really nice. It's actually made by the same people who designed the Juul pen, but those people also used to work designing iPhones, and then they started this company PAX. I think these are great. I think this might be, in my opinion, one of the most healthy medicinal ways to intake cannabis because you're getting the full effects of the flower or full spectrum effects of it rather than using an isolate, you know, like a vaporizer pen. It's not going to have, you know, necessarily all of the same effects that using the flower would.
Yeah. So now talking about all these different ways that you can take it, I know there's 3 different strands of cannabis, which is sativa, indica, and a hybrid, which is a mixture of the both. Can you explain to me what each one can do for you?
Essentially, you can kind of think of them as indica couch. That's a good way to say it. Or sativa Saturday.
Yeah.
So usually like indicas for most people will be a little bit more on the relaxing side. They tend to be a little bit more helpful with pain relief. They tend to be more helpful with as a sleeping aid. Now, that being said, I prefer indicas during the day because they don't necessarily make me tired, but they do help with anxiety for me. So again, one thing will not necessarily be the right thing for everybody. Sativas, on the other hand, are usually what are more energy providing, a little bit more help with focus. I've heard they're very helpful for folks with ADHD, or just people who maybe have chronic fatigue syndrome or need energy. They also can be both of the different kinds of, you know, sativa or indica. Indicas tend to, I think, have a little bit more appetite stimulation. Sativas generally have a little bit more suppressing of appetite. Within these different kind of polarizations of them, there are so many different kinds of strains, you know, and hybrids are just when there's a strain that is combined genetics of a sativa and an indica. Now, by strain, I mean, you know, there's all different kinds out there. I mean, there's, you know, Girl Scout cookies, there's Sour Diesel, you know, Chem Dog is a really popular one. There's all different kinds with, you know, funny names out there. I would always have customers come in and say, you know, I don't want any sativas because they're going to give me anxiety, or I don't want any indicas because I don't want to be sleepy. And what I would always tell people is that, yes, generally you can expect some more of these effects strain by strain when you look at things. There are also these things called terpenes, which are just botanical elements that actually exist in all plants. They kind of give the cannabis plants their unique smell, taste, and even medicinal properties. So for instance, there is a terpene called limonene. A lot of strains that have citrusy smelling or citrus names will contain limonene in it. Limonene has been known to help as an antiseptic, I believe. Also, seems to be something that helps with depression. One of the coolest things about cannabis is that our bodies actually make the exact same stuff that cannabis makes. We have, so we all over our bodies, we have endocannabinoid receptors, which, and cannabinoids are, what's in cannabis. So basically what happens when, for instance, you're having a migraine, one of your receptors is not activated correctly. It's not really working. So what happens when you intake the cannabis, it actually lifts up a flap on the receptor and activates it. So it's almost like our bodies were designed specifically to use this as medicine, which I just think is so amazing.
Wow, you are just, I feel like you're an encyclopedia for cannabis. I'm learning so much, and thank you for sharing all this knowledge.
Of course.
What can a first-time grower do if they want to grow cannabis for the first time?
So, I had mentioned before, I've actually never delved into the world of growing yet because it's kind of like having a pet. You have to really be on it all the time. But I would say if somebody's interested in learning how to grow or just learning more about cannabis in general, I've found leafly.com to be really, really helpful resource. They actually have an entire section on growing that can, show you what materials you're going to need for indoor or outdoor growing, and just a lot of helpful tips and stuff like that. And I always find with any information of this stuff, Google is an amazing resource. Like literally everything is on there that you want to know about this stuff. If you just search, helpful tips for starting growing cannabis.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. Leafly.com.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now when the Biden-Harris administration gets sworn in, they vow to decriminalize cannabis. What do you see cannabis being for the future in America?
My hope really, really is that expungement will happen in all of the states, because that is the most important thing. I think it's really horrible that there are people who are able to profit off of this industry while there are people sitting in prison for literally a joint. And obviously it's a huge racial motivation in the first place that was a thing. So what I'm really hoping is that expungement can be something that happens in every state. I also really, really hope that there are more people of color owned dispensaries, because at least in Massachusetts, the business was completely redlined when it opened up, meaning that basically only millionaires and like 5 people got access to opening up a dispensary. It's really incredibly expensive to do it. Now we're starting to see many more pop up, much more, more boutique cannabis stores, which is great. Yeah, so I'm really hoping that when it's decriminalized, at least decriminalized in different states, are also working to provide legislation to get people out of prison for this, because they should not be there while people are coming and buying this in the store.
Exactly. I think that hopefully it's a brighter future with cannabis, with all the benefits that it has, to be able to help clear cancer, help with our anxiety, and hopefully in the future a lot of justice will happen with cannabis.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I want to ask you, what advice do you have for someone who's trying to make a career within this industry?
So my first piece of advice is to be prepared to adapt to a constantly changing industry. I will say that every day will be different. And part of that is because the state's laws are constantly changing, or, causing there to be some kind of roadblocks in what, whatever you're trying to do is happening. I would say, it's all kind of like an emerging company's business right now. So just be prepared to adapt, be flexible, be ready to just be able to talk to all different kinds of people. There will be old people, young people, people from different cultural backgrounds from you, people who are very sick physically and mentally. And there will be people who make it really, really hard for you to do your job. So that's my biggest advice, is just being flexible and being open to anything that happens.
That is some great advice. Thank you so much for coming on to my show. You are brilliant, and just
Thank you for having me.
Of course, thank you for sharing your knowledge on the cannabis industry and just clarifying the benefits that it has and the future of cannabis in the world and in America. So thank you so much, Hannah.
Thank you.